Welcome out to another episode of Tax Sale Titans. This is episode number 23. I'm Shid Frey here with Stephen Swenson. We're going to be covering a number of different topics, things that'll be interesting tonight.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've got some exciting things. We're going to talk about Pennsylvania, how they work. We're going to talk about the importance of government liens and why we need to research them. And then we're going to go ahead and go look at some New Jersey tax lien certificate auctions that are coming up. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the chat section. And then at the very end, we'll go ahead and answer any of the questions that you guys have.
Yeah, I think we also just want to take a moment to thank our members, our coaching members, our YouTube members, but really all of those that follow us and that are looking to us for information. We appreciate it, and we hope to be able to continue to do more training.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one way to thank everyone is we're going to be having a free Saturday online boot camp. And so, we want to thank you guys for following us, for being members. It's going to be this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you're on the East Coast, that'll start about noon to 4, or if you're in California, specific time, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And so it's going to be free to all members. In fact, I think Shade might even put the link down there in the chat, and you guys can go ahead and join, and would love to have you out this Saturday.
Yeah, in fact, I think I've got the link down there right now. So if you want, you can go down to the chat section and click on that link to register for the boot camp on Saturday. We'd love to have you out. Now, post-auction review, we're going to be reviewing an auction that just took place here in Venango County, Pennsylvania, and this is an upset auction. Pennsylvania is kind of a unique state in terms of how it operates and how it conducts its tax sales. They hold a number of different types of sales. Pennsylvania is classified as a tax deed state, but it offers 4 types of tax deed auctions, starting with the upset auction, then a private auction, then a judicial auction, and then the repository sale is essentially what follows that. And so the other thing that's interesting about Pennsylvania is they have a specific office called the tax claim office that handles all of their tax sale properties, except for in a couple of different places here. But it's the series of different sales they do that's unique to any other state. I don't think there's any other state that holds a series of sales quite like this. And it's kind of interesting because the opportunities vary at different points here throughout the process here. Number one, upset sale. So when they first conduct the upset sale, you have full ownership of the property, you can buy it, but things like mortgages are still attached to the property. It hasn't actually been through a judicial foreclosure yet. And so it is an auction to buy the property. And certainly there are properties that aren't going to have mortgages or liens, or that, maybe those mortgages or liens are not a problem. There's probably lots of properties that don't have mortgages or liens that may come up in the upset sale, and they could be good deals. But yeah, anything that's left over from there goes to the private sale. And that's kind of like an over-the-counter version of the upset sale. And so the property not purchased at that tax sale, it still has mortgages and things that are attached to it in both the upset sale and in the private sale. Those mortgages don't come off until the third sale, which is the judicial sale, and that's where an actual judicial foreclosure takes place. And that's also when properties are free and clear of any of the liens or mortgages that are assigned to them. So it's not until that third sale that we actually get a judicial foreclosure that takes place and that wipes out other attachments or things that are other liens the property may have.
Yeah, exactly. So, when we're talking about the upset sale, the private sale, we need to make sure that we do our due diligence on those auctions. There still could be great opportunity. In fact, we're going to be looking at an upset sale today. And so I would say that probably less than 10% of the properties that we research have mortgages. So really what we're going to become common with is any type of government liens or something that could stick to the property, which we're still going to need to research. So it's a little bit similar to maybe like a bank sale, except for if there is no bank note against it, you're going to be in a good position. But once we get to that judicial sale, in fact, even most liens will be eliminated from the property. So unlike other states, when it goes to the judicial sale, even a lot of the city liens can get wiped out in many counties. Now, what the repository sale is these are the properties that don't sell in the judicial sale. And see, these are really kind of the over-the-counter properties. Now, some of them may be sold in an auction and others will be sold over the counter directly from the county.
Yeah, and so that basically kind of describes how Pennsylvania operates as a whole. What we're going to be looking at here today, I think, is this is an upset sale we're going to look at.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at an upset sale, and I did a few searches on them, and I actually didn't find a whole lot of, mortgages against any of these properties. But it's going to be kind of interesting to go through it. And for many years, me and Shay kind of snubbed our nose at upset sales. But I think that there really is probably a pretty good opportunity within here. As long as we're able to do our research, we still own the property. You can still take it through Quido. You can still sell it as is. It's just that extra level of due diligence. And so if you're willing to do that, these could still be great properties that are going to be picked up, most of these at minimum bid amounts. Now, the county that we're going to be looking at is Venango County. And, they're a little bit more rural county, but it was just the first list. And I started looking at some properties. I thought, well, let's just go through and see what sold at the auction that day. Now, one thing that we do like to do is to kind of get a look at the counties and look at what the real estate is currently on the market versus what the real estate is selling at. And so here within Venango County, we can see that there's 135 properties, and we're going to go check the last year worth of sold properties.
And have you separated them into lots and improvements yet?
No, because we're going to be looking at a combination of homes and
Oh,
land.
interesting.
But there's 513 properties total that sold within the county over the last year. And then if we look at the for sale, there's about 135 properties currently on the market.
Yeah, that's a
So
pretty good market.
yeah, so even though it's a smaller area, more rural area, there's still a lot of property that are selling, within this particular market. So here is the upset sell I was looking at, and it was actually just last year's sell. They haven't held it this year, and this is part of the reason we're talking about it now, is that they'll start doing some of their upset sells. But we're going to look through a few of the different properties.
Well,
Now,
and I think it's worth stating too that I think it's easy to look at something like an upset sale and say, because the property hasn't gone through some kind of foreclosure yet, that it's a problem. But in a lot of ways, this is the first opportunity you get to bid on these properties. And so a lot of the best deals are going to end up getting picked up here early on in the sale. And Steve's right in that so many of these properties are not going to have any kind of liens against them, and that's why it doesn't really matter if it's an upset sale. They're just as good of an opportunity in the upset sale as they would be in the judicial sale down the road. We just don't have to worry about any of those things at this point in the process because it doesn't have any liens.
yeah, exactly. So what I did is I just took some of these properties that we'll go look at. This first one here ended up opening at 3,300 and sold for 13,500, and we'll look a little into it.
Yeah, it looked like it was what did it say it was 1.87 acres. It had a full address.
Yeah, it's on 1.3 acres, and it sold for 13.5. Now, we don't have a street view with this, but one thing the county did is they provided us some information, plus we actually have some old photos of it as well.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why it's always worth looking at the property valuation sites like Zillow and Redfin, because if the property's been sold and listed before, we can have additional images here of it. It can tell us that information. We can oftentimes see when it was last listed or when the photos are from, so we can get some idea of their age. But we can always learn a lot when we find the properties like this on Zillow or Redfin.
Yeah, now the county did provide a photo for it from 2024, so we can see what it looked like a couple of years ago. Now, when I looked it up on Redfin, I didn't pull up any value, but I did find this property here, that sold back in 2021 for 123. They're valuing it at about 180. So I think if you were to fix this property up, it would, probably worth 120, 130,000, because it's very similar to this one.
Yeah, a lot of times comps can tell us more than anything with these properties, especially when we know where the property is located at. We can see what the nearby properties are selling for and what they're valued at. Yeah, these are
Yeah,
some
now,
interesting properties, really.
this one actually didn't get a bid on it. We can see it's a 2-acre lot, and we'll actually look it up here so you guys can see it. And there was actually quite a few that didn't get any bids. And so these are the properties that are going to end up going to the judicial sale.
it's kind of crazy to think about, though, that properties don't get bids, in a lot of these sales. And these can be good pieces of property. They can be good investments. They're just not getting bids because there's not a large number of investors that are trying to buy from that initial upset sale.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So here we can see that 2-acre lot. Looks like it's right between homes, a bunch of homes within the area. So it's
Yeah,
gonna,
that's a nice piece of property there between a couple of homes, and it probably has pretty good value. I mean, certainly I wouldn't turn it away. It's looks like it's big enough and it's in a nice area, and it doesn't look like it has anything too crazy in terms of topographical issues. It's just uncleared.
yeah, I mean, it goes down a little bit, but this whole area does. So, kind of homes are building up on it, but a nice good 2-acre parcel that nobody even bidded on. Here's what the county, I mean, what Redfin has it valued at 27,000.
What was it opening up for?
It opened up for 1,800.
That might be why, is the opening bid was just a little bit higher. If the opening bid was under $1,000, maybe it would have got a bid. Um, it's just high enough there that somebody didn't quite put it in, but it doesn't mean it's a bad deal at that. That's still a pretty low price for that property, which we can see is valued at closer to 30,000.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of seemed like it was valued between 30 to 35. Now this next one here ended up opening for 5,400. It sold for 18,000. In fact, this is one of the more they paid more for it. You can see it's this property right here. And there does need some work on it, but one thing I kind of found interested here, you can see from 2023 is somebody was in the process of doing a rehab on it.
Yeah, those are vinyl windows that have been updated on the upper part, but not on the lower parts here just yet. So some of the windows have been replaced, but not all of the windows. But we can see it's kind of a crazy entryway into the house, like a
Yeah, yeah. In
little
fact, you can
narrow
see
walkway there.
it's been neglected. I was kind of surprised, but the homes in this area are valued pretty high. They have this at about 157. I think if it was rehabbed and all done, it could be worth, maybe 180 to 200. Have to look into it a little more. But I did find it interesting because people were willing to pay up for this, and there might be reasons why. It would be interesting to even look in to see if you can find out what kind of rehab was done on it.
Yeah, I mean the property itself, the roof, I mean in this image, the shingles aren't great, but it doesn't look like it's leaking water here yet. It looks like it's probably still being lived in, and essentially it's probably a property that somebody was either building on their own or took a while to build, because it looks like it's kind of one of those things where they didn't finish up a few of the last things like siding the windows.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely needs to be finished. You'd have to see when it was last being lived in. Now this one here was opening up at 1,700 and didn't get any bid. And it's not the greatest house or anything, but I kind of, $1,700 house that didn't get a bid.
Yeah, that seems really cheap. I mean, it looks like so I guess the image is a little bit old. We'd need a newer image here of it, but yeah, it looks like a decent little house for that kind of money.
Yeah, yeah, for $1,700, they only have the Zillow value at the Redfin value at 44,000. I saw some similar ones that were selling between 50 to 60,000. So, you do have to make sure that there's going to be some room for you to flip it and profit, at $1,700. But it is interesting that homes like this that come on the market, kind of looking at the rental, it could be $750 to $1,000 a month. So they're moving enough property in here. If you pick this up for $1,700, change the locks, cleaned it out, maybe you're into it at $5,000. Could you turn around and sell it for 15 or 20, maybe 25? I think it's possible.
Yeah, you could probably sell it pretty quickly, at that kind of a price point, just because there's only so many places people can, only so many places that you can move into, or a house, for that kind of a price point. It's just really cheap.
Yeah, now this one ended up getting picked up for just the opening bid amount. We'll try to kind of go through some of these a little bit quicker because there's some better ones I'm looking down here at the list. And it needs some work, but still picked up for what, 4,500 or whatever.
Well, and it kind of looks like it's been lived in pretty recently, or if it was being lived in here at the time, that the image
Yeah,
was taken.
yeah, I think it was being lived in at the time. So they were still living in. I mean, obviously, it needs new paint. It needs probably a lot of things, and it's not a very high valued house, but still getting picked up for the opening bid amount. Same as this one here.
Yeah, that's a pretty nice looking property, really.
This is from back in 1999, so a little bit older image. Valued around 50. A lot of these they kind of have valued a little bit lower, which was kind of a little bit of a shock to me. But then when I'm going through and I looked at the sold prices, in some of these, the cheapest sold homes that have sold for 25 grand, and there were some that were in pretty rough shape. So I
Yeah,
think, you could, even though they need some work, I think you could flip them and still make a pretty good profit on it if there wasn't a bunch of liens on it.
yeah, especially the prices we're seeing here. These are the kinds of prices that you wouldn't have to do anything to the property. You could probably just turn around and sell them as is and be profitable with them.
Yeah, yeah, with a lot of them, I think that might be the strategy. Now, this one here didn't get a bid, started at 85,000, and we'll look a little into this one.
How many acres did it say included there?
Um, 15.75.
That's right. So it looks like it has a full address plus 15 acres. So maybe it's something like a farmhouse or something with,
It's actually a mobile home park.
oh, interesting.
So we'll pull it up here while it's
That's a
pulling
that's a
up.
pretty big mobile home park.
Yeah, so they've taken out a bunch of these, and I was looking up the information. I don't know if they had a problem with water or if it was a different mobile home park. I didn't have enough time to get into it more. But if we look at the county images, there was a lot more mobile homes all throughout this area. And obviously it got sold at the tax sale, so something was happening. But it's all of this area and comes back here. In fact, we'll look here, give you a better idea.
I wonder if they have all the, you can see, yeah, look at all the mobile homes that were there. They must have the hookups for all of that.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking, and you'd have to look and see what kind of issues are on it. I did find some type of lawsuit or judgment or something like that, and so you need to look into it. Maybe the reason it didn't get a bid, but still you're looking at a mobile home park for 80 grand that's coming up that you might be able to really turn into, you know, a really good opportunity. Plus, look at all that extra land that is available where you could bring in a whole nother row in here and really fill up that entire park, because at one time there was people willing to live there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how it's cleared out there in the back.
Yeah, yeah, in fact, it's interesting that they pulled it up here, and this isn't really even including any of that information. They're just kind of including just one of the houses or one of the main houses on it. Here's a sign, Woodhaven South. That that website is no longer available. This is one of the structures there on the property. But I did kind of think it was interesting, didn't get any bids.
Those are images from 2024, so there's still mobile homes there.
Yeah, well, you can see something happened to that one. So, obviously there needed issues, but if there is any people here, they may love to have it redone. And the fact that it's already been zoned as a mobile home park,
Yeah, that's half the battle.
yeah, I mean, even if you had to spend a couple 100 grand into making sure that you pay off back stuff and then go through and maybe you have to put another couple of 100 grand in. Let's say you're into it 500,000 by the time you're done, but you've got that all set up with 30 or 40 new spaces. All you might get a lot of people that want to be able to move to there and put their mobile home on your park.
Yeah, yeah, it could be a pretty good long-term investment. Mobile home parks certainly have a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, or you could buy all your own mobile homes and rent them all out.
Yeah, you could have your home park that you basically own all of the properties for, and you could rent them out and make a killing on it.
Yeah, look at this one here. Ended up selling for 7,000,
Oh,
opening
that's
bid
actually a good
again.
question. On that last one, are the mobile homes, would they be considered personal property or would they be considered real
Personal
estate?
property. In fact, most of those mobile homes, I bet there's a whole bunch of mobile homes on this list, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of those mobile homes could be even in that park,
Interesting.
because they're all sold as personal property, especially if it's in a mobile home park. So if it's not included as real property in the county assessment, then it's going to be taxed as personal property. And since this is in a park, these are going to be personal property. But I wouldn't be surprised if you could have bought some of the mobile homes in that park on this list.
Yeah, they probably are there.
Yeah. So this next one sold for the opening bid amount. You can't get a street view of it, but we do have some photos of it. And it's currently under contract for $230,000, picked up for the opening bid at
Holy cow! They bought it for 7,000 and sold it for 230.
yeah, well, it's under
It's under
consignment.
contract, but yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So this one to me was kind of the home run of the deal. You'd have to look more into it and see what was involved, but they're definitely able to get some money out of it.
Yeah, I mean that's as good a deal as you can get anywhere in the country.
Well, and you can see that they still have the old wallpaper.
Yeah,
So I
it hasn't been it doesn't, maybe
mean,
it's
maybe
original.
I don't know. I mean, they definitely cleaned it up. You can see how they cleaned out the basement,
Yeah, I mean
pressure washed it.
it's in good shape. The furnace and uh the furnace and water heater look like they're newer. The house is all cleaned up and ready for sale. Yeah, that's awesome.
But if you're looking at this photo from 2019, yeah, sure, that's a few years ago, but it was in pretty good condition then, in 2019. So I wouldn't be surprised if when they got into it, it was in pretty good condition.
Yeah, especially for the price they paid. My goodness, they got it for under 5% of value.
Yeah, awesome deal. Here's another one that sold for the opening bid amount for $3,800. It's just this little house right here.
It looks pretty nice too. Certainly being lived in. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, even throughout all the years there, there's consistent living there, and you can actually see that the windows have been updated and stuff on the roofs has been updated. That's a house that's been updated.
yeah, yeah. For $3,800, I mean, you can't get much better, even though it's not highly valued. There still could be a good rental income, especially if it's or just a property you turn around and flip.
It's going to be $700 to $1,000 a month probably, at least. And so it's the kind of thing you could pay out. You could have it paid off within 6 months. That's crazy.
Yeah, this one ended up selling for $2,800. We can't see the street view on it, but we were able to see some photos. This one's from 2019. This one was back in 1999, valued around $67,000. So you'd have to look more into it, but it was picked up for $2,800 and valued at 67.
Yeah, and a lot of these upset sales are about to begin again. In terms of time wise, it seems like we're getting into that time of year.
Yeah, they're going to start here. Some of them are going to be a little bit near the end of summer, but they can have some throughout. And plus, we'll be looking at judicial sales. We'll try looking at, well, this one didn't even get a bid. Valued at 75,000. But it's on 1.45 acres. And it's kind of interesting, at 3,400. We'll just look at one or two more and then we'll go. And you could do the same thing in a lot of counties. I mean, this is, not one of the biggest counties, but it's still kind of interesting. This one had quite a bit of land on it. You can see it, included all of this and then came all the way over to here.
Yeah, it looks like it's grass.
Yeah, so, obviously this house isn't in the best shape, but there was people living there back in 2024. We've got kind of a photo of it valued at 75,000, but also you're looking at all of this grass here and then this over here and then this one property back here ended up selling for like 2,500. So if you did want to build, I did notice that there was some big houses out within this area, not necessarily right here, but kind of within the area. And that's quite a bit of land, that didn't even get a bid on it. And we'll just look at this last one. So this one went from 3,500, ended up selling for 11. And we didn't get any information on, I can see it's out here, a cabin area, but all of these properties up here are pretty high valued. So
That's weird. Look at that weird picture.
Yeah, right there. It's kind of the overhead view. See how there's kind of a,
Yeah, they've got a different season there for part of the photo.
yeah. But I was able to get some, some of the county photos on, so you can kind of see it's a little cabin out there, valued at 128 and picked up for about 11 grand.
Yeah, that's a crazy deal too. Under 10% of value, is what they paid for it. And anytime you can pay that low of a price, your options are just endless. They could turn around and sell that property, for half of its value, probably pretty fast.
Yeah. In fact, we'll look at this last one real quick and then I'll flip it to you. This one's ended up selling for the opening bid. It's this property right here. And it was kind of interesting that, they had a 95, but you can see it was off market. So I think that this guy might have had it on the market after he picked it up at the tax sale. And he's taken it off the market. Maybe he's fixing it up now. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, that
But
is interesting though.
ended up selling for 5 grand. He was asking 95,000 when he initially asked it. So at least that gives you guys kind of an idea of the upset sale and what's available there within Pennsylvania. I'll go ahead and flip this back to you, Shade. So now what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about government issued liens. A lot of times students have questions, what kind of government liens stick? How do I find them? And so tonight we're going to kind of talk a little bit about why government liens are important and why we avoid them.
Yeah, one of the biggest risks for buying tax deeds or redemption deeds is government liens, or basically any kind of government lien. It could be something like a tax lien against the property, but it could also be something like, most commonly we run into liens against properties for things that need to be done, like cleanup work, or for grass cutting is a very common lien that we run into. They're actually very common with tax sale properties. And so one of the things that we need to do in order to make sure that we're covering ourselves is we need to know how to research and find those liens if they are attached to the property. We can figure out what kind of lien they are, how much they are for, so we can see if it's going to change the numbers on the deal enough that we need to basically move on to another property. So you never want to buy tax sale property without fully researching what liens might be attached to the property. We've seen liens, some liens are small and they don't affect the deal very much at all, but we've seen liens over $100,000. And so it can be anywhere in between. That's why you always want to go into it knowing exactly what the liens are and how much they're for.
Yeah, absolutely. So we covered this in full when we talk about stage 2 due diligence. So for any of our students that want to go through and review the entire steps, we'll have to replace that within the video library. But when it comes to judicial foreclosures, they're going to go through a court process. So a tax sale is going to be a judicial foreclosure that's going to notify all the parties that the property is going to be sold for back taxes. So if any of these contacted parties, whether that be a bank or any other type of mortgage or judgment that could be against the property, if they don't resolve the tax issue, then just like the homeowner, it's going to be sold for the back taxes, and the property itself is no longer going to be collateral for that bank note. And so when we're talking about tax sale investing, this is kind of the important process. Is it's going to eliminate those mortgages, but what it's not going to do is it's not going to eliminate other government issued liens. In most cases, now we talked about how Pennsylvania will do that, and there's some states that don't, but generally speaking, those aren't going to be released through this judicial foreclosure. So it's very important that we research for those and at least know what we're bidding on when we're bidding on it.
Yeah, liens, liens have different levels of priority or precedence that they take. You know, we've talked before about how tax liens are a first position lien, and it's because they can take priority or precedence over any other type of lien. That's kind of the way a judicial foreclosure works as well. A judicial foreclosure has to have the power to take out and remove any liens or encumbrances that are attached to the property. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the ability to sell the property at tax sale because it would have so many things that were attached to it. This is kind of the last opportunity here that any of the parties with interest in the property have to pay off the delinquent amount and to avoid foreclosure, because once it completes that judicial foreclosure process, then like Steve was saying, the property is no longer collateral for the property. And so, yeah, we always want to be aware of any liens that exist against the property. It's possible we see IRS liens and state liens. Sure, we come across them on a regular basis, but they probably represent less than 10% of the liens that we actually see. 90% of the liens that we see are issued by local cities or counties or municipalities, and they're most commonly things like nuisance liens or utility liens or demolition liens. And all of these liens are liens we need to watch out for because they can be fairly large amounts. I mean, even just something like a grass cutting lien can start off as a $600 lien and then can go up in price at the longer it's delinquent or longer that it's owed, or something like a demolition lien. Anytime we see a property that has a driveway on it and there's no structure there, we're always concerned that there could be a demolition lien there. Was there a house here at one point that they had to tear down? And if they did, the fee for that, where's that fee for the tear down? Because that's oftentimes attached to the demolition lien.
Yeah, well, even something like a nuisance lien and a grass cutting lien, there's some cities that I kind of think abuse, their right of going out there and cutting up the grass. I mean, do you really need to go out there 4 or 5 times a year? We've seen that happen within cities. And so each time they do that, let's say they charge $400. Well, you can see how that can suddenly add up if the property's been sitting, this building lot has been sitting vacant for the last 4 years or 5 years. And so that's really where it can be dangerous, where you're buying a property that you think you're getting a good deal on. You're picking up this lot for $1,000 and it's worth 12, 15 grand, just to come to find out that there's $15,000 in grass cutting liens. We've seen that happen. And so it's important that we know exactly what we're bidding on. Now, the good thing is that these records are now open to the public. The big difference from when me and Shade first got started with this is that most of these counties, most of these records are going to now be online through the county government websites. So in the past, we had to go down to the county courthouse. The first thing we saw was the tax collector records, then the assessor records, and now we've seen most of these online records or clerk court records now become available online, which gives us the opportunity to do most of the research from home.
Yeah, it's usually the department that handles the recording of the deeds, liens, and mortgages was usually the office that keeps the records as well. So what we're usually looking for is the county clerk or the county recorder in most cases. If we can pull up a property deed though and look at a property deed, so if we can see that the property sold in the past and we pull up a property deed, it's usually that same department that is that we get the deed through, that where we're going to look for other liens that could exist against the property. So that's usually going to be with the county clerk or the recorder. And what we're looking for specifically is when liens are issued against properties, they're not actually issued against the property itself, they're issued against property owners. And then details about the property might be included in the lien. And so what we need to do is we need to know the names of the owners that we need to do this the searches for, and then we need to look for records that show up, liens, that may have or may be related to that property. So it's usually name searches that we're doing once we find the right record search tool.
Yeah, exactly. So like Shade said, the department that usually is handling it is going to be the clerk or the recorder. We can do a quick Google search and find, or an online search and find out what department that is. Usually it's going to be one of the first departments that come up using the keyword in the state. And then from there, we're going to be able to usually go to like the clerk's office in this case, or the recorder's office. Now, occasionally they may have the records together. So in this case, you can see at the very top there they have the court records, and those are for civil and criminal cases. And then down below they have them as the official records. So a lot of times they're going to be separated like this, but we have seen times where some counties may have those records combined. But in this case, we can see that this is the department that handles the deeds, the mortgages, the marriage licenses. That's going to include any type of judgment. So that's going to be the department that we're going to go to do any type of online search.
Now, once we pull up the record search tool, which is essentially what we need, we need a tool here that allows us to plug in a name and then pull up all the results that are associated with that name. And what we're essentially trying to do is manage the number of results that we get back. We're trying to make our job easier if possible. So if we pull up a large number of results, because some people own a lot of property or they have a lot of records there that are listed under their name. So if we ever run into that, we can also search by specific document type. So we could search under a name and under liens and just pull up those if we pull up too many results. And then we can just see, so maybe we have 500 results total, and then we do it to a name and a lien search alone, that might reduce the number to 15 or 20 liens. And then we can go through and look at those liens and figure out if any of those liens are attached to our property or the property in question.
Yeah, definitely. So when we're looking up a property there in the list, we're going to use the parcel number in the assessor's office. But when we're looking up for records, we're going to be using the owner's name, because any of those records are going to connect to the owner's name. So here in the example, you can put in the owner's name. Sometimes you can just add it all together. Sometimes you'll have to separate it in this case. But you can see that there's a total of 4 records. And so this view, we can go ahead and look and see what type of records there is. Well, we can't see any type of, we see traffic infraction, we see a probate guardianship, but the probate kind of gives us a little bit of information. This is probably somebody who passed away, and we can see something there from the circuit court, which is the foreclosure notice, but we don't see any government issued against this property. So we would be pretty comfortable in bidding on this property knowing that it doesn't have any government issued liens.
Yeah, and a lot of times lien searches are that simple. We can pull up, we can see the results that are there, and in the absence of the record is evidence in and of itself. But they look all different. So here is an example for Little Rock, Arkansas. This is their search tool, and under the name of Brian Bankhead, we did that search there, and it pulled up a total of 2 results. Well, we can see from the 2 results that we've got a warranty deed here, and then we have something listed as other type of lien. The other thing that's important for us to look at is to see who the reverse party is, or who is the party that's involved with this other lien, because that tells us whether or not it's a government issued lien or not. In this case, it's the housing and neighborhood programs for the city of Little Rock. So we know that that would be a government entity that would be issuing a lien that we would need to watch out for. So we would pull up that lien to see what we could learn about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in this case, we can see automatically underneath the type of work, it says demolition and related cost. You can see it was ordered under an emergency, and the total cost of it at that time was $8,671. Now, one thing that's good about looking up this information is we also have the contact information for the people that we need to contact to find out more about this lien. We can see the information down there at the bottom. We'll have a phone number there, an address, a person to talk to, a lien number. And why it's so important is that $8,600 can be $10,000 now. There may be interest that the city is charging. There may be a daily fee. And we can see this is back in 2022. So we're not going to just trust that that lien is that amount now. We're going to need to go ahead and give them a call and find out.
Also, if the lien was paid off, which sometimes liens do get paid off, that would show up as an additional record. So the fact that we just see these 2 records and this is it means that the lien probably hasn't been paid off. It probably is still valid and exists against the property. So it'd be a good idea to call into the housing and neighborhood programs and find out what the lien amount was if you're still interested in the property. If we're just looking at a basic building lot, though, just knowing that the lien exists might be enough for us to say, you know what, we're just going to pass on it and look to a different property.
Yeah, in fact, this is actually a lien that was on a property that we researched last year, and we went to the auction with our students, and our students saw these people bid on these properties and more properties like this, not realizing that there was a $10,000 or a $15,000 lien. There could have also been a bunch of grass cutting liens on the property, and so these are the mistakes that we see at live auctions and then also bidding at online auctions. And as long as we do our due diligence, we know what we're bidding on. Let's say it was only a $200 grass cutting lien. Well, in that case, maybe it could be worth bidding on. But when it's a $10,000, $8,000 lien, we're probably going to avoid that on a building lot that's maybe only worth 10 or 15 grand.
Yeah, which that is a big factor whenever we find a lien, is to figure out how much it changes the numbers of the deal and whether it's still worth it, looking into the property or not. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it just isn't. Sometimes there's just not enough profitability in there to make up for the lien amount.
Yeah, exactly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at New Jersey. We haven't talked about New Jersey in the podcast yet. And so we want to talk a little bit about how New Jersey works, and also look at an auction that's coming up on May 6th in Ocean County, Tuckerton.
Yeah. Tuckerton, Ocean County, New Jersey here. Let's take a look. So New Jersey is a tax lien certificate state. They use tax liens, and they actually hold auctions throughout the year. They have a whole bunch of sales that will start here in May for some of the different counties there. But one thing that's different about New Jersey is, rather than having counties always doing it, it's usually done by local municipalities or cities in some cases. It's not always a county, but sometimes it's a county, like in this case here. But yeah, essentially there are 567 municipalities that do this. And so that's, this one we're looking at right now is one of those 567 that does this. Now, some of the details on how they treat liens. So the maximum rate of return is set by state statute at 18% annually, or about 1.5% per month. And there is an extra redemption penalty, or $200 plus is earned, a 2% return of $5,000. Maybe I'll
Yeah,
let you explain that part of it, Steve.
yeah, exactly. So with the rate of return, you're going to have the maximum rate of return of 18% a month. But this is one of the things that investors look at in New Jersey as well, is they have this extra redemption penalty. So for liens that are $200 or more, you're going to earn an extra 2% return. On liens that are $5,000 plus, you can earn an extra 4% return. And on liens that are $10,000 plus, you can earn an additional 6% return. So occasionally we've seen liens bid down to 0%, and it's because the person, or 0.25%, I guess it's 0%, but a lower interest rate return on certain properties, because they know that they're going to be able to make an extra 6% guaranteed return regardless of when it redeems. So it's kind of like that penalty in Florida a little bit, where you're going to get an additional penalty on top of your interest earned.
Now, in addition to that, the liens in New Jersey are sold with a 2-year redemption period. And something that's important to note is that the purchasers need to have the certificate recorded by the local tax collector within 60 days of the sale. So that's something you'll do there to make sure that it gets recorded. But beyond that, there are a lot of liens. Something else that's different about New Jersey in the way that they do sales is they treat different utilities as part of taxes, essentially, or utilities and different fees like that can also lead to liens against the property, just like a tax lien would. And so when we go and look at some of the sales there, you'll see different letters that represent things like taxes or other fees, maybe utilities or sewer fees, we'll be able to see tied in there as well. So let's pull up the sale and let's go take a look.
Yeah, and there really is a ton of auctions coming up in May. In fact, I was just looking through Florida, and Florida auctions are going to be opening up. There's a ton of Maryland auctions opening up. So for those investors that are looking for tax lien certificates, there's Mississippi taking place right now, Alabama. There is so many different opportunities right now for tax lien certificate investors to be able to bid on tax liens.
Yeah, we're a couple pages back in here because there are so many different sales here. We see, this one right here in Glassboro, and that one opens up on the 20th. So in 5 days, it opens up here. And let's see here. We are towards the end of this list here.
Yeah.
And no, not that one there. It is, there we go, Tuckerton. So you can see these ones, though, we've got a lot of sites here that open up. That one opens up on the 20th here. This one opens up on the 17th. This one right here, though, is currently open. So let's pull this up. And it has the traditional look here of the real auction sites. And so we could go and register here if we wanted to do that. If we want to preview the items for sale, though, we click right here and it'll show us. So they're there's a total of 103 records that they have available here. And let me enlarge this just a little bit. So we
Well,
can
and
see, oh,
no,
go ahead.
I was just gonna mention one thing to mention is this is, I mean, there's 536, you know, different municipalities that will hold these different type of cells. So this could be a pretty small area, and it makes sense that there's only 160 tax liens against this area, because you're talking about a pretty small area, because each one of these municipalities will hold their own auctions.
Now, if we click on, there's a couple different links that we can click on here. You can see, if we're looking at that, we've got this first link here, and there's a second link that is listed as well. The second link pulls up, I think it goes to the county website. But this first link, what it does though, is it gives us kind of a preview here of the property. So we can see the property address. Now, one thing that's interesting, they didn't put any of their valuation information in any of the properties. I don't know why they did that. I guess it's just, I don't know. I don't know why they didn't include it here, but it's the information. I mean, the property. So if we pull up and look at some of these properties here, we can see the easiest thing that we found is to just pull up the property address, and in some cases you can just click on that actual arrow there, and it'll pull it up here. In other cases, it takes too long. It's faster
Well,
just to plug it in.
and some of these real auction websites will include a lot of different links, and then some of them aren't. But if we have to go through an additional step to look up the property, there may be investors that just go ahead and avoid those, and so we're going to be able to earn a higher interest rate return by going through a couple of more steps, where other people are just going to go ahead and give up before getting started.
Yeah. So this is, now if we're looking at this lien here, the one we clicked on here is for this name right here. This I can't pronounce it here, but it's for $6,300. The T would tell us here that this is for taxes that are owed. But if we click on total charges, so actually first off map, it'll kind of show the overhead image here of where our property's at. But under total charges, what we can see is what it is that the $8,000 or $6,000 consists of, and we can see that it consists of property taxes, about $5,400 in property taxes, plus about $800 in interest, and then they have the cost of the sale tied into that as well. So about $5,500 of this is just property taxes. Actually, most of it's all just property taxes and interest here on the property.
Yeah, and the reason there's already interest on it is because the county, or the city in this case, has already been charging them interest before they actually sell the tax lien. So they may have already been delinquent 6 months or a year, and that's where some of that interest is coming in, is because it's being um, it's a cost against them, because the city is holding the lien until they start selling it, and then an investor can earn the interest.
Yeah, so this particular lien that is for $6,000 roughly is against a home. We can see here, this is a 1,300 square foot home valued at $400,000, highly valued, sitting on about 5 acres of land. So it's a pretty safe investment here, for the $6,000 you pay compared to what the property is estimated to be worth. And that's what we're looking at in a lot of cases here, is just to make sure that our money is secure and that the property has enough value. And what will most likely happen here is the property taxes are going to get paid off and the property is going to redeem. And this happens with most liens, that is what happens here. And when that happens, you make a good interest rate return. Everybody kind of gets what they want.
Yeah. Well, and you can see which ones are just on water and sewer. And that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that's kind of interesting, is you can have, a tax lien that's maybe only $100 or $200 on a $1 million house, because it's just part of a sewer or water lien that wasn't paid.
Yeah, like for instance, with this one, so we could see some different numbers or letters here that were assigned with this one. We saw T, a C, a W, and an S. And we can see what each one of these are. We have the property taxes that are owed on this particular property, which I'll show you this one. This one's kind of interesting. I think it's the whole, I think it's, well, here, I'll pull it up here. I think it's a property dock, or not dock, but a boat dock, and some boat slips here. It's like the whole thing. If we look at it overhead here. So yeah, here's the address. And one thing that's interesting about this too is if you look at under the parcel details, you see right here it says additional lot 63, and it's the Cedar Cove Marina of Tuckerton. Is what this basically, that's what the owner named it. And so there's 63 slips, I think, that are included in this. That you're kind of looking at there overhead. So it's probably a very valuable property. It's a larger lien of $15,000, but the property itself, as I'm sure, is worth a lot more than that, and it's probably securing the property pretty well.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about the rental income that could come in. In fact, can you go there on the map and click on the street view down there? Well, can you click on that and it'll pull it up?
Sometimes it's kind of slow.
No, I was just interested to see what it looked like when
Actually,
I hate when
yeah.
it does
So
that.
what I can do though is I can just grab the address and I can pull the address. And
I just kind of like to see what it looks like from a street view. That's awesome. I mean, you think about that, that's got to be a highly rentable property.
yeah, we can see it's in that area here, but there it is. So there's the entryway going back there into it, the Cedar Cove Marina right here.
Yeah, they've even got storage of boats. So each one of those boats are probably paying, you know, 50, 100, $200. I'm sure the slips are more than that each month. That's, that's residual cash cow there.
Yeah, yeah, it is a pretty interesting property here. And yeah, starting at about 15,000. We can see, in fact, a lot of the properties like this are kind of interesting that way. Here's another one. So about $5,600 is the opening bid amount. We've got the property address right here is listed as Parker Road here in New Jersey, Tuckerton. And here we can see the actual property itself and where it's located at. I've got the address, so let's pull it up here this way.
Yeah, that's a nice home.
Yeah, so we've got this house right here. It's kind of an interesting place.
Yeah. You can see the one.
Yeah, the water's right behind it. These are all on the water. Yeah, you can see right back there behind them. But let's see. Let's just see what the value is of the property, or if it gives us a number.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, about 262,000. So it's a $5,500 lien. That includes some other fees that we had there, like so at this one, about 40. Let's see, about $3,700 of it is property taxes, and then you've got 150 cost of sale fee here. You've got about $800 in water fees and about $900 in sewer fees. And so they're kind of combining all of those there. But by paying that off, though, you're also paying off those other liens that exist against the property. You're going to make money on all of those, and it's basically using that property as collateral. And the property itself has plenty of value at 262, so it's most likely just going to end up getting redeemed, and the liens, will be paid off.
One thing to say though, if you're looking at all of those, that means they're delinquent on not only just their taxes, they're delinquent on their water and sewer as well, which means that if we're looking at tax liens, that one actually may have a higher chance of redeeming, even though the redemption on it is very
Or
low.
a higher chance of going to foreclosure.
Yeah, going to foreclosure than one that just maybe has the taxes, because maybe they're paying their water bill, they're paying their sewer bill. We'll just pay our property taxes when we get our tax refund in, or something like that, where you can see that these guys in that particular property have been delinquent on more than one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, and there are some more properties in here, that are kind of interesting. Let's see I think this was one of them that was kind of interesting here. So this one is a larger lien, 21,300. Let's see if you look at the overhead map image here of the property. It's listed as actually I can't tell if this is Krabby's skate shop here, a skateboard shop. Maybe here we can pull that up here on the address, but it's definitely a commercial property here.
Well, and I'll bet that over 90% of the liens on this are worth bidding on, because I wouldn't be surprised to see some liens that may just are a water fee lien that are a $600-700 lien on a $300,000 property.
Oh yeah, this is a great property here for a commercial piece. At least we're looking at this property here. That looks like it. So far, it's split into vape lounge and south, south and vapes. Basically, it's divided into two different businesses.
Two different smoke shops.
Two different smoke shops.
You got the competition right next to you.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. And yeah, we've got the address here on the property. And so that's a pretty nice commercial property. I don't know, it's probably not going to pull up on a Zillow for valuation here on it. But if it's anything like the other properties we're looking at, the value on this property is probably going to be north of 500,000.
Yeah, well, and you could look up in the county information and get an idea, or through the records and get an idea. It's a little bit harder sometimes in the research in New Jersey, but if you're willing to go and look and see within the city or the county, we can usually pull up the information to get a good idea of what the assessment is and what the overall value is on it. But
Yeah. So yeah, there's liens of all different sizes here. Some of the liens are smaller. I mean,
what's
we've been
that?
looking at.
What's that E? What's that E? Right there in the middle.
Let's see, total charges here. E is excess bills. I didn't
I
know you
don't
could
know if
have.
I've seen that. What does that mean?
I have no clue. It's for about $1,000, but it's for excess bills. So the only one they have in this is the cost of the sale at $70, and then some excess bills charged for 1,000.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that before.
And it's, it looks like it's against commercial property. It kind of looks like another boat property or some kind of something to do with that. Let's see what it is.
Well, yeah, this is definitely a community that's on the water, you know.
Oh, we must not have a street side image here of that. Oh, maybe we do.
I think you're looking down that road, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's down there. That's what we're looking at right there. Yeah, I think it's down there. It's something over here.
Or it may have popped us on a different street.
Yeah, that's possible too. Yeah, there are, all of these are quite interesting. We can see this one, $6,000 lien here. We can see here from the image. So it's right close to that other property. You can see how close it is.
Same owners.
Yeah, same owners and right next to this other property here that we were looking at, just a little bit further down the road. In fact, I don't know if we have a street side image of this one or not. But yes, we do. Oh, no, we don't.
Saying the same thing.
I think that's it. I'm not even sure if that's actually
Yeah,
it or
I'm not
not.
sure either. It says we're on Green Street there,
Yeah,
but it doesn't look like it.
yeah, we see the $6,000. Is the amount. It appears to be some kind of a structure or a building, which we could look into further. But yeah, we can see here that the cost to sell. There's a water bill here and a sewer bill that's kind of adding up there. So about $4,000 in taxes and about $2,000 in other bills.
Yeah, well, and going through here, it's not going to take too much research to determine if it's going to be a good lien. Chances are we're going to be making our money back. We also have that penalty that can apply in many of the areas. And so, with as many different auctions that are taking place, if you're willing to get registered and bid on them, you know, we've had students that have gotten really good interest rate returns in some of the sales, and we've seen other sales where the bidding was just pretty aggressive, where people were bidding them down to 5% and even under in some cases, because they were also looking at that penalty rate that could apply as well. But then others where they could get them for 16 to 18% and may include the penalty.
Yeah, we can see this one's about a $10,000 lien here against this house that's valued at 840. That's kind of what you're looking for in the numbers, is you want to see what the percentage of value is that the lien represents. And when liens represent a tiny percentage of value like this, like under 100th of a percentage, in some of these cases here, or roughly a hundredth of a percentage, they're very secure liens. This $10,000 lien is highly secured by a property that's valued at nearly $1 million.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, and
Oh,
we're
and
not.
it's a 2-year redemption period after the sale. Sorry, I just saw that question pop up.
Yeah, well, and we're not going to have to do the same level of due diligence. We're not really worried about mortgages and looking into liens. As long as it's a good property, the liens usually about 1% of the property's value. Chances are we're just going to make our interest rate back. And so, as long as it's a good usable property, we're not going to really be too worried, because we're still going to have to go through a judicial foreclosure if they don't end up paying us off.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, these are great investments, and the vast majority of these do pay off. And New Jersey has a pretty good high rate of return that they pay out. I mean, at 18% annually, at least the starting point here, the high point, it's as good as any tax lien state in the country. So a pretty good rate of return and also consistent sales. That's the other thing New Jersey has is they have sales just happening all the time. I mean, we're looking at the sales here for April and May, but if we were looking here in June, we'll see the same thing because there are sales always happening throughout all of these counties in New Jersey.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. In fact, we go ahead and make sure we add all of those upcoming auctions in our auction calendar so that our members can go to the auction calendar and see which auctions are taking place. But yeah, they're going to have a number of different cities and townships like this that'll be doing auctions each month. And they usually put out the information about, 2 to 4 weeks before they're going to list the sale. And then they'll kind of say, we're going to open up the auction date on this date. And then from there, we can get an idea of when the actual auction is taking place. So hopefully that gives you guys a pretty good idea. If we have any questions, we can go ahead and answer them. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap things up.
Yeah, I think we've been kind of answering questions as we go here. But if anybody has any more, welcome to ask. We'll be back again though next week for another episode covering some more areas and new auctions. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us.
Yeah, and hopefully we can see a bunch of our members on Saturday for the free online boot camp.
You bet, we'd love to see you there. So hey, thank you everybody. We'll see you on Saturday.
Yeah, appreciate it.